You've probably heard this phrase before: American exceptionalism. The idea that the United States is permanently ahead of everyone else. But history tells a very different story, because no country stays on top forever. In my last video, I asked a question. If a country spends over $2 billion every single day on its military, what does that mean it isn't investing in? That question brings us to something people don't like talking about. The myth that certain countries are permanently dominant, that their position in the world is somehow guaranteed. But economic history shows something very different. Leadership isn't permanent. It's something countries have to keep investing in. And I actually encountered this idea decades ago when I was in university studying manufacturing and inventory control systems. One of the books in our curriculum was called The Race. And the entire premise of that book was that the global economy is exactly what the title suggests: a race between nations. The book itself was written as an allegory, but the message inside it was very real. The countries that win the race are the ones constantly improving how they build things, how they educate people, and how they innovate. The book was written during a period when something very interesting was happening. Countries like Japan, South Korea, China, and Germany were rapidly improving their manufacturing systems. They were investing heavily in quality control, engineering, and industrial efficiency. And those investments started producing results. One of the places that race became visible first was in the auto industry. By the late 1970s and into the 1980s, foreign automakers were building cars widely considered more reliable and higher quality than many American vehicles. Toyota, Honda, Volkswagen. You get the idea. This wasn't because those countries were somehow magically better. It was because they'd invested heavily, decades before that, in engineering, production systems, and workforce training. Meanwhile, some American industries had grown comfortable with their dominance. And when competition finally arrived, it caught them off guard. That's one of the reasons tariffs have often been used in the automotive industry. Not because foreign products were inferior, but because often they were more competitive, whether in price, reliability, or efficiency. Tariffs are a way governments can protect domestic industries from being overwhelmed by that competition. And that creates an interesting tension in economic systems like capitalism, because capitalism is often described as a free market system where companies compete and the best ones rise to the top. But tariffs interrupt that process. They're essentially a government intervention program that slows down competition in hopes domestic industries have time to adjust. Now, sometimes that works, but sometimes it simply delays the inevitable. Economists call this managed competition, where governments try to balance free markets by protecting key industries. None of this means the United States has stopped being a major economic power. Far from it. The U.S. still leads in many areas of business, just not necessarily because they're exceptional. But the broader lesson still matters. No country stays ahead automatically. Global leadership isn't something you inherit. It's something you have to keep earning and something you have to keep investing in. Because while some countries were debating how to protect their industries, others were investing aggressively in the industries of the future. And over time, those investments have compounded. Which brings us to the next part of this story. Because several countries made massive long-term investments in science, technology, and manufacturing. And those investments are shaping the global economy today. Economic leadership isn't permanent. It's built slowly through investment, education, and innovation. And the countries that understand that usually end up shaping the future. So in the next part of this series, we're going to look at what happened when some countries made those investments. because places like Japan, South Korea, and China have poured enormous resources into science, technology, and manufacturing. And the results are changing the global balance of economic power. Peace out. And if you're not already following me, you should. It's going to be a ride.